Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual panel discussion, where we're going to be talking all things open and accessible AI systems. Before we get into things, I first just want to appreciate each of you for attending today. I know that you're coming from all over the globe, different time zones. Some of you it's morning, for some of you it's evening. So we just really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today. We're going to do something a little bit different. So today it's going to be a conversation, not a presentation. You won't be seeing slides today. And we know you've been asking a lot about, what are we seeing from our customers and how is generative AI impacting customers and actually creating outcomes? So what you're going to see is some conversations from exciting guests we have where they're going to actually share their stories about how open ecosystems are enabling tangible outcomes. Now, before I hand it over to Justin, I want to lay just a couple of ground rules. The first being, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just use the Q&A button in Teams up at the top. We have a dedicated portion of time at the end of this where I will ask your questions and we'll make sure that they get answered. And then the last thing is everything that you hear from us today is under embargo until tomorrow, July 18th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Justin Hotard. He is our Executive Vice President and General Manager of the Data Center and AI business at Intel. So Justin.
Well, thank you, Casey, and thank you all for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. First of all, I want to set a little bit of context for the discussion today. I'm very excited about our guests, but I want to set the context around what we're seeing in terms of Gen AI adoption. We're seeing a massive boom in demand for Gen AI. And ultimately, that demand for Gen AI is going to lead to a massive boom and transformation in the data center, a new architecture for compute, a new architecture for the data center, and ultimately a tremendous cycle of evolution of workloads, particularly around AI. But we also recognize that demand for AI and the demand for compute that it's going to drive is putting a new spotlight on availability, performance, cost, energy consumption and efficiency, and of course, data security. And we also recognize that because most of this adoption will ultimately happen in enterprises. In fact, enterprises are expected to consume the majority of the demand over the next 4 to 5 years. By 2026, we expect 80% of enterprises to have adopted Gen AI in some form. And why? Because over 80% of the world's data is actually contained within enterprises today. And so that demand from enterprises and the adoption that we're seeing also requires us to realize that not everything can be greenfield. Much of the adoption of Gen AI today has been in greenfield applications, greenfield data centers. But ultimately, over time, it's got to be a combination of leveraging existing applications, existing data sets, existing use cases. And so as a part of that, what we're expecting is customers are going to look for choice, for flexibility, and for the ability to integrate into those ecosystems and those application stacks that they've already developed. And that's why our efforts, our development, our product roadmaps are oriented around enabling AI from PC to edge to data center to cloud. And we're investing in a heterogeneous software stack and an open ecosystem, whether it's at a fundamental hardware level, things like liquid cooling and infrastructure design, rack scale, interconnect technologies, but all the way up through the software stack, open frameworks, open models, our partnership with Hugging Face, because we realize that ultimately this entire ecosystem needs choice, and developers are going to need choice and flexibility to maximize the value to their end users and their customers. And so with that, what I wanted to do is, rather than me telling you more about this, is hear from some of our end users and customers. And so I'm thrilled today to introduce a few of our panelists that are with us today. First of all, Kaveh from the International Olympics Committee, Rob Clark from Seekr, Stephen from Red Hat, and joining me in the studio today, Bill from Intel. So welcome, and maybe I'll start, Kaveh, with you. Let me start with you. You're a member of the International Olympics Committee. You're a former Olympian. I'd love to talk about some of the challenges that you see in supporting the thousands of athletes at at an Olympics, and maybe a little bit about what you're doing in the upcoming Paris 2024 Olympic Games. I know they're right around the corner, so no pressure, but love to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing to support athletes, at the Olympics and more broadly globally, and how you're addressing some of the challenges that you've seen over the years.
Thank you very much, Justin. First of all, let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone as well from me, live from Paris. Only about 9 days out from the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, which we are very much all looking forward to. Just in my role as the director of Athletics department here at the International Olympic Committee, together with our team, we look after the direct relationship and engagement with the athlete community during the games, and also very importantly between the games. And we are developing and working on a number of support programs to support athletes, again, in the lead up to the games, and in many cases also after the games in their career transition to life after sports. Here, if we wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges that we have, which I can really myself remember from my own days, is just the volume of information. And with digitalizations, this volume of information is even increasing. Frankly, when I was competing, I would argue that it was a bit easier because you just didn't have access to so much information. And as much as information is good, it can also become overwhelming. It can be sometimes even difficult to understand and be confident where is the source of truth, and this information that I'm accessing, is this everything? Is it true or not? So some of our challenges over time we have noticed is really helping our stakeholders, so that being national Olympic committees and international federation, and specifically for our stakeholders from our department point of view, the athlete community, have easy access to the information. And I know we are going to come into that a little bit later in the discussion, but that has been one of our key priorities, to try to help everybody within the Olympic movement to have easier access to information. At the same time, and with this challenge that we have, we also have an incredible opportunity, thanks to all our top sponsors, that there are some of the best companies in the world. And here, of course, we have the opportunity to have this session with Intel and your partners. So we are very much looking into how can we work together with our top sponsors, the sponsors of the Olympic movement, and leverage from their expertise to find solutions for some of these challenges that we have. Because again, you guys in your own area and your own field, you have access to the best expertise and the best knowledge, and it will be really pity and it would be a shame for us not to use that. And typically from history, we have been able to find really a win-win situation for everybody. The last piece I will use also to answer to your question is that as part of this digitalization and the volume of information, one thing that the IOC has done, and I'm sure you're very well aware of it as your executives were also involved in the public launch of it, is the work that we did with Olympic AI agenda. Because again, with AI having so many opportunities that is opening up to everybody, of course, we are all aware of also the risks that we have to be aware of. But again, being the optimist, we look into the opportunities, and having, again, some of the best companies in the world, we have set the Olympic AI agenda to really put this new era of technology at the surface of the Olympic movement and the athletes at large. So this is what I would like to say as introduction before we get into a little bit more the details of it, about what we are here to discuss.
Yeah, and I think this partnership you describe, I think this is why Intel has found such great value in the partnership with the International Olympic Committee. is that we're actually driving real innovation that's delivering value ultimately to the athletes. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the process and how this solution was developed. And I'd love, if there's possibility as well, I'd love to maybe show the audience today a demonstration of it.
No, fantastic, definitely. Maybe just to give a bit of a history, and I know is not somewhat directly linked to the discussion, but give a little bit of a background of our previous partnership and collaboration with Intel. Actually, the first time that together with Intel we developed something for the benefit of athletes directly was in the COVID era. And Intel was one of the first sponsors reaching out to us. We all remember those days and those really difficult period, and we got around the table at a very virtual table, obviously during those days, and we started working on a program for mentorship and the mental health of athletes. So our collaboration with Intel for the direct benefit of athletes, it actually goes some years back. So really, again, huge thanks here to Intel for being always proactive and coming forward and offering your expertise for the benefit of the athletes. Here in the new projects that we are very excited about, and is obviously directly related to the core business of Intel in the area of AI. I refer in my first part about the volume of information that is out there for athletes. So about 6 years ago, we developed a website called Athlete 365, which basically is the one-stop shop for all the information that the IOC has for athletes. We just launched this week the Athlete 365 app. Again, recognizing and acknowledging that nearly 70% of our users actually access all the information on their mobile phones. So we wanted to take it to the next level, and we developed the Athlete 365 app, which hopefully, and we are confident, it will really help the experience of athletes. But we also realized that's not enough. The reason being is just the volume of information you can really get lost. It's an ocean. So, and that's where the background, the conversation with Intel came about that, okay, how about we could benefit from AI and really make it as easy as possible for athletes to have simple questions saying, where can I get this information or that information, and really guide them to the source of truth and make sure that they get the answers in a very quick way, literally at the top of their fingertip, and in a reliable way. So maybe actually, Bill, this could be an opportunity for you to kind of give a little bit of a live demo of what some of the example of this could look like for athletes here in Paris.
Sure, Kaveh. Let's do it. Let's do it. So we know there's a lot of interest in questions about photography. Let's see if we can ask our chatbot one of those questions. So this is, can I post a photograph from an Olympic venue during the games here? And we'll just ask the question, and well, here's the response, right? So it's quick, it's accurate, and this is because the IOC has loaded data into the chatbot application that the athletes need to know. And of course, we're using a RAG solution to be able to make sure we're getting that accurate and up-to-date information. And then, of course, it's all powered by Gaudi 2 accelerators and Xeon processors. All right.
Great. Well, I think this is a great example of an application. You touched on a few key technologies. Obviously using a fine-tuned model with RAG or retrieval augmented generation, and it's a great example, Bill, of I think what we see with end user use cases. I mean, Kaveh really covered a great example of an end user impact. I want to shift gears a little bit and now talk to Stephen, because if I think about the end user, I'm going to work back to the developer who's ultimately spending the focus and the energy around delivering that value to the end user. And so let's talk about the developer's perspective and how they deliver these real world solutions. So Stephen, maybe you could share with us a bit of your perspective. You spend time with developers regularly, and I'd love to hear, across all the organizations where you're talking to developers, I'd love to hear your insights around what are the challenges that they're facing. How are they keeping up with the rapid evolution of technology and AI, the rapid evolution of models, of frameworks, and give us a little bit of insight to what you're doing at Red Hat to support them and enable them, and potentially how the partnership with Intel really facilitates that.
Uh, this is a great one, and honestly, I couldn't have framed it up any better than Kaveh and Bill did with the demonstration there. At the end of the day, developers are really focused on the consumption of this data, right? And you're right, like there's data coming in from anywhere. There's more than any individual can process. For people to make meaningful use out of it, whether it's individuals like athletes or the general public or enterprises, you have to really focus on the usability and consumption of that information. So from a developer standpoint, there's a lot of concerns when it comes to just general model availability, right? There's been an explosion of available models for them to choose from. It's unclear the risks associated with using those models, whether it be related legal risks or cost concerns. From there, every customer and every enterprise is looking to customize that model with their data, right? Everyone starts with a model that they can get off the shelf or from Hugging Face. But the end goal is to be able to take it and customize it with your own information, right? We saw that in the demonstration you just gave around the Olympic data, right? They customized that model with information around the Olympic venue and activities that are going on, and with athlete information. That then brings other challenges, right? If you're going to customize that model, you're going to have to lifecycle it. You're always having new data that comes in. How are you going to make sure that model stays up to date? How are you going to test variants of that model? When it comes to then deploying it, right? Right now, 9 days before the Olympics kick off, there's probably a handful of users testing things, making sure nothing's going to crash. In about 9 days, I bet you the use of that application explodes. And when that happens, how do you make sure the systems are able to scale and support the workload that's going on behind the systems? And then when you talk about scale, you start getting into cost control concerns, right? So where you deploy a model, how big the model you're deploying is, and whether you're using like public services versus your own hosted services, all have impacts on the overall cost of running that service. And so when you look at how these are being addressed, like these are a lot of concerns for a developer to try to address individually, right? Yes, they could probably roll out an initial version of an application with a solution that they grew themselves, but we're really starting to see expansion in these interoperable solution frameworks. Things like what we've been working on with Intel around OPEA, which is based on coming up with like a retrieval augmented generation, so a RAG-based solution that's repeatable and is able to provide bridges across a lot of the seams in the concerns I talked about to allow customers to customize models that they pick very quickly and get them rolled into production, and then use things like what we've done with like Red Hat OpenShift and OpenShift AI to be able to scale and manage costs across multiple platforms.
And so you touched on this on open and interoperable solutions, Stephen. Maybe you can share a little bit about not just why this is important, but why some of these initiatives are important. Things like OPEA, where we've sponsored and announced the open platform for enterprise AI. But how maybe you can say a little bit more. Red Hat, obviously the steward of open source in the the enterprise for many years. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how do these challenge some of those those constraints, and where do they really enable developers to accelerate?
Yeah, another good question, right? Like I'm a technologist at heart. I love the bits and the bytes that go on behind the scenes. But when you're looking at a consumption-based world, really having the repeatable patterns in place give you speed and agility and choice, right? And so when you look at like what we've done with OPA, you're giving developers a repeatable pattern that can be deployed across multiple platforms, right? So things we've worked on with Intel around OpenShift AI, we can support multiple processors, right? You're not always going to have GPUs available. You mentioned that the application, Kaveh's application, is using Gaudi 2 processors, right? That's usable for a certain set of use cases. But then like Intel has Xeon processors that are great for another set of use cases, and GPUs for another set of use cases. Having an interoperable solution pattern lets you move the application around and put it on the right processor and platform for a given use case. This helps control things like cost and just your ability to deploy closer to the data for further customization. And then you look at like laying it on top of one of our application platforms like OpenShift AI. This then gives you consistency across multiple hardware platforms. So whether you need to deploy that application in a particular hyperscaler, or if you want to run it in a private data center in hardware you own, from an application developer perspective, you're developing the code once and you can move it around these platforms for cost savings, scale savings, just general availability, and concerns like that. So interoperable solutions really are going to be the future of AI. And they're happening in the open because there's no single vendor anymore that can really address all of these challenges. It's a combination of leading technology innovators and those that are providing these core platforms like Intel and Red Hat, combined with a lot of what you're seeing in the innovation space with startups and other open source communities coming together to provide these end-to-end patterns, right? You're not going to get it from one vendor anymore. The best way to do that, and we've proven it over time, like over and over again, is to do that in open communities.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Stephen, and actually a perfect segue maybe to Bill about, RAG or retrieval augmented generation is fundamentally a solution that depends on interoperability. Yes. Maybe you can share a little bit, Bill, with the audience on why does Gen AI RAG solutions matter? What's relevant for the enterprise?
Yeah, what's relevant for the enterprise here, Justin, is data. So enterprises have tons of data, often proprietary data, historical data, and data they need to put to use. And when you look at LLMs, they're a great innovation and invention, but they don't have access to that enterprise data. And so what RAG, the technology and the paradigm allows us to do is marry those two things together so that we can do like what we saw in the demo, where we can ask questions, get the power of the LLM with the specificity and accuracy of enterprise data. At the same time, we can keep that enterprise data secure so it's not being shared with the world or with the LLM.
And so even if I think about APIs or these agents that are out in the industry today, that those are being touted as solutions for proprietary data. But what you're saying is there's still constraints there. Even if I used an API call or a specialized agent, I'm still limited on what I can actually do in terms of accessing my data.
You are, and with RAG, it's one of the paradigms, and this is an evolving industry, as you know, but it's one of the more powerful paradigms that really can stitch together data LLMs in a secure, scalable way that businesses can quickly go and put to use for their particular application.
And maybe share a little bit about why this why this solution around an open platform, the OPEA platform that we've launched, this open architecture principles, why is this so important? Because we're talking about proprietary data on one side, and then we're saying, well, it's got to be open. So maybe share the connection between the two and how this really both enables developers to simplify their development, but also provides enterprises the confidence and trust and security that they can deliver value to their end users.
Yeah, absolutely. What we saw with OPEA and RAG is there's a common design pattern, and as Stephen said, it's just too big for one company to go and implement everything. But we can collaborate with our partners in the industry and the ecosystem to build out that common design pattern. And we've done just that with OPEA. So it's an open source project with contributors from multiple sources, and it's in the open. And so you can take about 14, 15 microservices that we put together collectively. And those microservices can be used to create a combination of solutions. So you can create a chatbot or a video summarization tool, or a tool like we did for the Olympics, right? So you can create all of those solutions using your data as the enterprise, knowing and having the confidence that it's your data only, but still bringing the power of that generative AI solution.
Got it. Well, thank you. So I want to bring Rob into the conversation. Rob, you've got probably a great perspective here, because we've been talking a lot about proprietary data, open source tools, enabling developers, delivering value to end users. But underlying all of that is a premise around doing this responsibly, right? Not just protecting data, but delivering insights, actions, taking actions, recommendations in a manner that's responsible. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what Seekr is doing to develop some of these these foundational Gen AI capabilities with LLMs, and then of course how are we making sure that we're future proofing and protecting malicious content, with generative AI, either from being created, from being introduced, from being augmented into these models. So Rob, love to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. And thanks, everyone, because I think we've all said in one way or another that the quality of the data absolutely matters. And look, sadly, there's no timely example right now than the assassination attempt a few days ago. You think about the volume of information that's been generated around that, whether that's the floods of news reports, social media messages, user-created videos, national, international. At some point, that finds its way into a generative model. So we need the capabilities, we need the tool set, we need the visibility to really evaluate, to understand the quality of the information coming in during training, and then also what's coming out at inference in time. And that applies to business too. The quality of that data that's in there. A lot of business have very large amounts of that data. There might be multiple sources of truths. How do we get to the bottom of that? And the approach we've taken is you look at the business model for search, you look at the recommendation algorithms for social media, they're all based on popularity, not credibility, not reliability. And that can't be the standard when we train models, especially when they're used for key business decisions. And we all know that has a real downstream impact here for businesses, for developers using them. Can they rely on that data? Can they rely on that model? So spurious and inauthentic information has to be identified. We have to have models that are bias aware. When we talk about responsibility, it's not about eliminating every bit of information we don't agree with. It's about the understanding. And again, enterprise data is no different. You must build on a foundation that can be trusted, and you must have the tools to validate as well. And that's really what we do at Seekr on top of Intel hardware. We have the full platform, the AI applications, the pre-built LLMs that train, that validate, really important, and deploy and scale what we would always call trustworthy AI. And that validation word really is important. So you think about a developer, they have the tools to unit test, to integration test, to know how their code's going to impact an end product to a user. The same tool is needed for AI and models. How do we validate them? How do we see if they're not correct? How do we change that output? And this might sound a bit extreme, but you think about a nuclear plant, the wrong input, hallucination, something wrong in the data or the model, you can only imagine the dangers in there. And again, might sound extreme, but no one foresaw a chatbot on a major airline for a major airline's website that was actually costing them money because the information it was giving out to customers was not correct. So all of this ties back to the openness that we're all talking about here, which is really openness throughout the stack. And we've really focused on openness into the models, into the training data itself, the choice of models too. So we don't just lock in on our own. We're all talking about how can I take open source, closed source, but how can I tell how reliable and how credible they are if I'm to build a product on top of them. And we offer that through a product called Seekr Flow that runs on-prem, that runs in Intel Tiber Developer Cloud as well, whether that's Kubernetes, whether we're running on-prem with OpenShift as well. We've always looked at interoperability as key. But let me give you an example of really a customer we recently launched as well, where you can see kind of the real world application of how that makes a difference. So they're an online platform for entrepreneurs, for startups, an incubator used by some of the largest organizations nationally and internationally. They have a reach of over 250,000 small to medium businesses. Using Seekr, they launched a whole new application powered by trusted generative AI, and that's a chatbot where entrepreneurs can go to that website, ask real questions in a human form, and get reliable, honest, correct answers. This is all about their customers making a decision based on this information they're getting back. And that's often to buy a service, to buy a product. So you could ask it, hey, I'm a new company with 10 employees. What's the best credit card now? I need the lowest fees and I need cashback rewards specifically. And it will recommend, it will compare, it will give you the pros and the pros, pros and the cons, and give you those options as well. They don't have to go to a search engine. They don't have to look through results. They don't have to avoid the sponsored listings. It's genuine answers that impact their business as well. Their customers get a faster response out of it. And if that was wrong, they wouldn't get that right answer. You would mislead that customer. They could buy the wrong product completely, not what they wanted. And that's a real impact as well. And that's running right now on Intel Tiger Developer Cloud, on top of Gaudi, and on top of CPU as well, on the Xeon CPUs. And really, just to touch a little bit on the developers and how easy that was for them, our customers really sit in two buckets. We have a whole set that need an AI application. They need something out of the box they can start relying on, understand that gives them an AI outcome. We call that Seekr Align. On the other end, we have developers that need that full platform, the full end-to-end, the training, the validation, the insights, and then the scaling at the same time. And I'm sure you can imagine that takes an enormous amount of compute power to evaluate information and to generate it at the same time. And we achieve that on top of Intel's hardware.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, Rob, is particularly powerful because it's a new capability that we need to consider so that we deliver real value within enterprise applications and use cases. And I think, to the point we were talking about a little bit before, some of these early applications are very consumer oriented. If you think about what we're dealing with today, or you get one definitive answer, and a lot of times, particularly in enterprise use cases or just in life, there might be multiple potential answers. And so giving customers those choices and being able to say, well, it could be this scenario, that scenario, these are things you need to consider, and then getting into that more integrated dialogue is probably a great example of where, what you're describing, Rob, is going to be immediately valuable for early use cases. So, look, I think we're out of time. So I want to just close here by thanking all of you. Stephen, Kaveh, Rob, Bill, really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for the insightful discussion, and we look forward to continuing the conversation in future sessions.